Hi, I'm Kevin Robert Brooks. I'm the author of the forthcoming book, Zodiac, the Montana Connection, the true story of America's most sought-after serial killer. In today's episode of the Zodiac Master of Ambiguity Series, I will be sharing with you my theories on the skeleton card and what Donald E. Bujok, whom I believe was the Zodiac Killer, wanted to convey in this chilling communication. There will be a total of 5 communiques in this series where I reveal the true meaning of each. They are the dripping pen card, the dragon card, the Halloween card, the 13-hole punch card, and what I call the Rosetta Stone of all the cards, the peek through the pines card. I like to call the Zodiac the Master of Ambiguity or the King of the Double Entendre. I personally coined these terms because the Zodiac's cards and letters often had multiple meanings. His horrible deeds, coupled with these cryptic cards and letters, sent law enforcement officials on a wild goose chase that left the state of California in sheer terror. The word ambiguity is defined as a word or expression that can be understood in 2 or more possible ways. Double entendre is defined as a word or expression capable of 2 interpretations, with one usually risque. It is very important that you remember this to better understand my theories of the different Zodiac communications, because rather than look at these cards and letters as separate communiques, I looked upon them as one entity. You'll see the connection too, I'm sure of it. Let's get started. In his various communiques, the Zodiac told us who he was, where he had been, what he had been through, and last but certainly not least, what he would do about it. He would finally get the attention he sought, live out his fantasies, and seek revenge for the wrongs he felt the world had bestowed upon him. He would kill. The Zodiac Killer skeleton card. Ominous, threatening, dark, sinister. These are but a few words that describe the Zodiac Killer's Halloween card. Hi, I'm Kevin Robert Brooks. I'm the author of a forthcoming book called Zodiac, the Montana Connection. I know, it's been so long since I've been saying that over and over again, but the truth is I went through a lot of loss and a lot of personal pain along the way studying this case. Today we're getting close to Halloween again, and we're getting close to the day, October 11th, when Paul Stine was killed, and also October 27th, when the Zodiac sent his famous Halloween card. I've been asked by a lot of people through personal emails to show a picture and show what the original card looked like, because I have a number of copies of it that I'll show you right now what the original card looked like. The original card was actually green, and it actually was 6 3/4 inches in size, in length, and you can see it here. I'm going to show it to you close, and I'm going to bring it up a little bit right there, and you can get a good look at it. You can see that on this card he doesn't have the bug in the eye, he doesn't have the 14, and he doesn't have the pumpkin on the front, okay? So if you open this card up, this is what the original card looked like inside, okay? That's what it looked like inside. You open it up completely, it looks like this, okay? I know that everybody's been interested in wanting to know what that original card looked like. There's the back of the card right there. It's a Gibson Halloween card. I've got a number of these I collected on eBay over the years. But I also collected some of the, I had a friend out in California that sent me a bunch of these from the David Fincher movie. It was a promo. And this is actually a little smaller. It's only 6¼ inch. And you can see that he's done some work on it. He actually pasted a pumpkin on the front of it. Can you see that? I'll get that enough. Okay. And he added the 14 in it. Okay. And he added, it looks like a little bug in there. Could be a bee, it could be a, you know, something of that sort. On the back of the card, he has by fire, by gun, by knife, by rope. Okay? You can see that. And then you open the card up, and it says boo. And then you have, of course, the skeleton that looks like it's posed in a crucifix type look. And it says boo. He writes boo in there. And when you open this card up, you see he's also added a bunch of eyes. You can see he had the original eye was inside the hole right there, if you can see it. And he had added all those other holes. Yeah, 13 total eyes in there, so you can see that. And he added that in there. And of course the skeleton, and he has the red mask over it. Okay. And I'm going to do some explaining on this card. I was going to go through a whole thing and make a fancy video and stuff, but I've been meaning to do it for a long time. Now, I get my information on my suspect, Donald Lee Bujok, from deputy wardens, ex-cons that knew Donald. The oldest living prisoner in Deer Lodge Prison, his name was Bill Rose, and I got to be friends with him and interviewed him and talked about Bujok, who he knew, and he knew him as Bujack. And I also interviewed Frank Dryman, and Frank was very hesitant to talk with me. We didn't talk much, but we talked about Donald, and again, he called it Bujack. And that was what Donald was known as in prison. So I want to get to the meaning of this card. A lot of these things I have from Donald's family and from work I've done online for years of a lot of old things that pertain to Donald. This is a check from the Roundup Mining Company where Donald's father worked, and I have a bunch of these. I have them all stacked around here, see. And besides that, I have a bunch of things where Donald signed his name as Bujack. So when I want to get to this card, I want to show you who my suspect is. His name was Donald Lee Bujack. Donald Lee Bujok. Okay? It went both ways because the family had kind of some quarrels, and some of the family used Bujack and some of them used Bujok. And sometimes he was known as Bujack. In prison, he was known as Bujack and also the Bull. He was known as the Bull because he was about 5'10" and he was stocky, strong, 230 pounds. But this is Donald here, and first of all, what I want to show you is that he does fit the physical description. Number one, he was in Deer Lodge Prison. Number two, he had murdered before. Number three, he spoke with a very strange tone and a very strange monotone voice. He had the light brown hair with the red tinge that was described by Zelms and Donald Falk. I know they said they didn't stop him, but there's too many things that show that they did stop him. And I think Mrs. Zelms actually said that what Eric had said to her was what the Zodiac had said. But that's Donald there. You can see he has the light brown hair with the red tinge. I have a lot more pictures of him since he was a child. I've been trying to get somebody interested in this for a long time, but most of them, because they've been swamped with people coming across saying, oh, we got a guy and he's got the same wrinkles on his forehead or silly things like that. I've been trying to get people interested. I called San Francisco Department of Justice, and they said, send me what you got, and kind of blew me off, you know. But that's happened to a lot of people, and I don't blame the San Francisco Department of Justice. They got a lot of things to do now. But there is Donald Lee Bujok. Here is, if you want to look at the wanted poster, you can see the wanted poster right there. And if you notice in the wanted poster that on the first one was the original composite done, described by the Robbins kids, the original one right here. And you can notice his hairline is kind of blunt there, and his mouth is closed, and his face is a little narrower. And when they amended it, I would guess they amended it because Falcon Zelms told him this guy was, he had a slightly receded hairline, and his mouth had a strange formation to it, and they opened the mouth up, and he'd walked with a shuffling lope. Well, I have Donald's medical records. I saved him from being thrown out, and he did have problems with his right knee, and he couldn't get it fixed, but I'll talk about that later. So getting back to the card, I'm going to tell you the actual meaning. I have everything, and I've told people for years I have everything on this, and I guess I'm getting frustrated because I'm getting old. I'm an old man now, and I've had this stuff for years, and I've been talking about it, and I've never looked for any money. Frankly, if I made money, I'd like to help some of my friends that really need help instead of profiting on a book or something, because I don't need anything. But I'm going to tell you about this card right now. What this card was, everything he did were in these cards, like the Peek Through the Pines card and the Ass card, the Ass's Dragon card, the Dragon card, if you want to call it that, the Peek Through the Pines card, the Dripping Pen card. All of those cards were all his communiques. We knew a long time ago that the ciphers would say nothing. And there is one cipher that does that David Ornchak solved, that I believe he solved it, or maybe Graysmith solved it. They both look pretty close to what I would think Donald. I'm not an expert on ciphers. I don't know much about ciphers, and I know more about psychology. And when I looked for Donald, the Zodiac, I was looking for a guy that had early abuse and neglect issues, possibly reactive attachment disorder. I was looking for a guy that had speech impediments, some speech problems. I was looking for a guy that was probably bullied, and I was looking for a guy that had murdered before and fit the physical description. Well, I found him in Donald. So I'm going to show you what this card really means. This card, you can imagine Donald going through a carousel, and you can imagine him looking with his glasses tilted down, his head tilted down, to find the perfect card to send to the San Francisco Chronicle. And this one was the perfect one, and he knew what he was going to add to it, and he did. And there again is the original card from Gibson. So what he adds on the front is a pumpkin. Can you see that? Okay. And why he added this pumpkin is Donald's name was Donald Lee Bujok, but he was also known when he was younger, and some of his family went by Bujack. He went by Bujack while he was in prison. What he was telling in this card, he gave all his clues in these cards, the Dripping Pen card, all those cards, never mind the ciphers. The ciphers I know were because what he wanted to do is he had said to somebody that I know that he wanted to keep the cops busy, because all they do is sit on their fat asses anyway, is what he said. And so what he did with this card is he added the jack, what is a pumpkin known at Halloween time as, it's known as a jack. And then he added the boot. It's simply a clue. Okay? It's simply a clue. But all these are clues, and the other clues on it are the time he spent in the hole. They actually had killed a deputy warden by the name of Ted Rothy. Ted Rothy was a great man. He was a family man. And on April 16th of 1959, if I'm not mistaken, I'm doing this off the cuff, there was a riot involved, and Donald was one of the ringleaders in the riot. And you have to remember, Donald had a terrible, terrible early life. He was his mother had manic depression. She wasn't able to care for him like she should have cared for him. He was neglected oftentimes when he was sick. He had painful ear injuries. He stuttered. When he went to school, he was bullied by other kids. But let's get back into the card. It says by fire, by knife, by gun, by rope on the back of it. And there his depiction of what he went through. And that's what I've said all the time is I call him the Master of Ambiguity, or the king of the double entendre. Donald is telling us what he went through. And generally when you get with these serial killers, you'll find that early abuse and early neglect, that kind of thing. But in that this particular card, he's showing you his name, Bujack, again, Paul Averlee to Ver Lee, Donald Lee Bujack, And he also adds the 14 there, and if you add that up, I've showed that before. Now, I could be wrong on some of these things, but most of them I know I'm probably right, because I got to talk to I got to talk to Captain Don Diott and Bob McNally and another guy, Mr. McNaughton, and they were all knew Don Bujok, and they told me stories about Bujok while he was in prison. I know what Bujok or Bujak did, his first jobs, and they were all with the experiences he had as being the Zodiac. His first job, when he got out of maximum security, he was in prison. He was, because his role in this riot, my good friend Kevin Giles wrote a book about this called Jerry's Riot. It's a great book, and I learned a lot from Kevin about the prison as well. Can you see that okay? Good, okay. And during that riot, I said a deputy warden actually did die. And if you remember, when Zodiac was out at Lake Berryessa with Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell, September 27th, I think, of 1969, he had told them, and they don't know for sure exactly what he said, but he said something in the sense of that I killed a guard escaping from prison. Well, Donald didn't himself shoot Ted Rothy. That was done by a young man named Lee Smart. He was Jerry Miles' boyfriend while in prison. He shot Ted Rothy. So when you, as a group, and there were 14 of these people, 13, and then you had Donald, 14 altogether that were supposed to be charged, but only 13 were charged. Donald ended up going into the mental hospital, and he never got charged with that and actually got out of prison early. But what I'm going to tell you here is that they did kill Ted Rothy while in prison. And I got the pictures to show, and he was a good man, and he didn't deserve what he got. They also stabbed another guard and stabbed him all the way down from his armpit all the way down his arm, and the man almost bled out. So that was by gun, by knife, right? And what they did in this, when they were in this riot, they told the hostages that they were going to kill these people, the rest of the hostages they had, by knife, by gun, by fire, by rope. They were going to either hang him, they were going to stab him, they were going to burn him on fire. And how they did that is they took some naphtha. They had saved some naphtha, which is like cigarette lighter fluid, and they saved it for a time. And they stored it away. And when it got time for the riot was planned. I got papers showing that Donald was sent to the tower to dig out. Him and Jerry Miles actually were digging out together. So thus, if you ever see the Peek Through the Pines card, it actually shows a man digging, and I think that might have caught Donald's attention. I can't say for sure. But what he's showing you again in this card is his name, Bujack, Donald Lee Bujack, what he went through, what he was in prison for, by knife, by gun. That's a clue. It's not a, this is me, I'm Donald Lee Bujok, or I'm Lee Allen. It was none of that in there, but they're clues. And Don was very, very intelligent. But like I said, from his early life, he was bullied horribly. I don't know how he could have ended up anything but a serial killer when I talked to and personally interviewed people that knew him when he was young. The abuse he went through by other kids and such, it was just horrible. I can't stand, if there's any things I can't stand, it's bullies. And I've seen enough of them online and that type of thing. So anyway, he did masterfully pick this card out, and he said, it says, he didn't write this, but it was on the card, perfect. I feel it in my bones, you hate to know my name, so I'll clue you in. Boo, Jack, that's added. There's a little clue that when he was in prison, what they did. When he did tell Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, I killed a guard escaping from prison, it wasn't in 1967 or 66 or whatever. It was back in 1959 when they killed Ted Rothy. But he was culpable for it because he was part of those 14 men that killed this guy. And they took his life. So he actually should have spent more time in prison. He should have spent his life in prison, actually. Okay, we're going to get... We see the skeleton there, and I think David Ornchak just found that in a card. Of course, I've written to David Oranchek and shown us the other things in his own work that shows Donald Lee Bujak's name in one of his ciphers. He thinks he didn't solve it, he did solve it, because Donald went by, I have got writings where he spelt his name Bujak, Boojack, I got Boojak. It's all over the place, but I have those copies, so we know he was named Bujack, and that's what they called him while he was in prison. So there's a hint on the back about what they did to. This is a good site that you can see. Can you see that, audience? Okay, good. A little bit up. Okay, so you can see that. And I have pictures again of Ted Rothie. But again, if you look here, and I hope I'm not confusing you, but I'm trying to be thorough and go over all of these things. Donald was a loner when he was young, and of course he said that early attachment disorder. I talked to John Douglas about that, and I mentioned that he had never heard of reactive attachment disorder, but it was something that it didn't get into the DSM-5 until recently, and it wasn't even in the any of the literature much back then. But it's when a child lacks bonding. It can be very a lot of symptoms are the McDonald triad, where abusing the small animals, wetting the bed. What is the other one? Starting fires, and some of those things I mentioned in my book about Donald that I have that are interesting. But again, I went here and showed you had your 14, and if you look at that, can you see that card all right, audience? Here, I'll do it a little higher. If you look at that card, you got 14 there. And on that 14, if you add that up and you go 4, 1, 2, you get 7, 6, 4, 1, and the 2 that he has up, you get 7, 6, and then if you add them all together, you get 7, 6, 36. Well, that was actually Donald's birthday. Now, that could be coincidental. I don't know, but it's there. It's there, right? So is the by knife, by fire, by rope, by gun. So is the death of Ted Rothie. And of course, one of the tortures they did to the prisoners in there, and Donald was one of them while he was in maximum security for his role in this riot, was that he was only fed bread and water and sent into what they called the hole. It was just a black hole, and I think that is showing you right there what he went through. And they would also sometimes, if the prisoner got unruly, and the guys all told me, you never knew when he was going to go off, just like Ed Edwards said. You never knew when he was going to go off, and that was what a number of the guards told me. And he was sent to the hole quite a few times. So in the hole, people were brung to madness. These prisoners were brung to madness. Is that okay there? Can you see that? But can you imagine spending sometimes 24 hours or 3 days in total blackness with just a peephole out there? That is what this man went through. So he was created by the world in a sense, and I'm not saying feel sorry for the serial killer, but I have never seen a life that was so abused. And I think he gave to the world what he got, and I'm not saying it's okay or anything like that, but he's showing you what they did to him. They used to tie them, they would chain them to the top bars in the cells, and they'd let them hang there, and they would, if they got unruly. And they also were only fed bread and water, and sometimes they would bring them in salted pork or salted beef, and some of the guards were as sadistic as some of the prisoners would actually laugh when these guys would ask for more water, because they would have this salted beef, this kind of what they gave the prisoners there, and they would choke on it, and they would laugh when they heard them choking and such. And that's what he actually said in one of his letters. He talked about what he would do to the people around him, his fantasy about giving salted beef to people and listen to their cries. Well, that's what was done to this man, this Zodiac, Donald Lee Bujok. I've gotten to know his family really well, and they're really good people. Everybody in the in the world has people in their family that are not quite right. I know I do, that's for sure. But that'd probably be me. But anyway, when you look at that, I kind of tried to decipher that. And being as Donald was, he worked on ranches and stuff when he was young out in In fact, he was on his way to a ranching job when he killed Deputy Fawson. So again, you have a man that fits the description. He was 5 feet 10, 235 pounds when he got out of prison, according to his sister. He had light brown hair with a red tinge. He spoke with a very unusual cadence. It was slow and measured, like Brian Hartnell described, and that's what I looked for. He walked with the shuffling lope. He was in Deer Lodge prison. He had access to guns, and he was an excellent marksman. So I know all these things, and I've known him for years, and I've tried to talk to people, but when I've talked to people, either people wanted to take my work and claim it as their own, or they wanted to totally disparage my work and make it like it was a joke, because it's silly, and most of these cards that he sent were childish. Is this okay? Can you see that? Mm-hmm. You know, this is childish, and all the other cards were childish. If we look at I hear your ass is a dragon, it's childish. And if you look at I just washed my pen and I can't do a thing with it, well, again, we know what that was about. He used his pen. There's an old saying, the pen is mightier than the sword, and he used his pen to kind of hurt people and scare people, and he felt empowered. A guy that was always powerless all of his life, Donald Lee Bujok, bullied, didn't really have much of a mother figure when he was young, bullied by his peers when he was in school, made fun of, beat up at the bus stop, and I personally interviewed people that knew of this. And of course, when he was only 21, he ends up in prison for shooting Deputy Fawson, Otto Fawson, 67-year-old Deputy Fawson. And what I know about that is Fawson had said something to him that kind of enraged him. And so he shot him 5 times in the neck and throat. But these cards, it's coming on Halloween, but this is what he meant by this card. And I figure I'm going to just show everything I have, because I can't, I don't know if I'll ever have time to completely, I've gotten the book finished, and then I had another person working with me, and I really decided I wanted to do it all on my own, because to show it from my perspective, what I did, who I talked to, that kind of thing, rather than somebody else's perspective and somebody else just taking my story. And what I've done is, again, I've showed you on there, we're going to look again in this card. I've shown you he tells his complete name in there, and I also showed you that on the front he's got this sign again that says Z. And what I believe that was is he worked on cattle ranches and stuff, and it's a brand, and what it means is Zodiac is a veteran 4F. Now, he was in prison, he was in the Army at Fort Ord for 7 months, but they didn't, he made it through 7 months, but he was booted out after a psychological diagnosis of cyclothymic personality disorder, which was a kind of an early sign of bipolar disorder like his mother had, which they used to call manic depression back in the day. But again, you had a guy that was, at everything he'd done, he was very intelligent, but he didn't appear so. If you were to see him, you wouldn't think of him as being intelligent. His mouth slightly held open and dropped open, just like they did, and they showed there when they amended the wanted poster. They opened his mouth slightly. They receded his hairline, just like you can see in the picture. Now, I've showed people these things, and I have a few people that know of my work, and I personally showed it to them. I tried to get a couple people that I really admire, like John Douglas, to look at my work, but I really wasn't successful in getting anybody to, except a couple friends, to actually look at my work. I had a friend named Pete Ramponi who was part of this project and passed away, which really kind of put me in a mess, but for a while, and some pets. But again, in this card, we showed you by what the meaning of this was. I hope I'm not going around in circles, but that's me. I'm ADD. Again, you've got where they did kill Ted Rothy. They killed Ted Rothy. He was shot, and that was Donald was culpable for that too, because he was involved in that riot. He was one of the ringleaders with Jerry Miles and Lee Smart and the other characters that they had in there. I get thanks to Julia Brewer at the Deer Lodge prison, and thanks to Kevin Giles I got to speak to all these people and ask them the right questions. So again, these cards are all clues to who he was, where he was, and why he was. The ciphers mean nothing. Now, I don't have a computer to go ahead and decipher the computers, but I did suspect, because I knew Donald was into crossword puzzles, that it might be something down or whatever, but that's beyond my, my intelligence to mess with the computer end of it. But what I looked at is this psychological aspect. You had a bullied child that didn't really have much in the way of parents, father figures, mother figures, and his peers rejected him. And then he gets to 20, it goes into the army rejects him, and then he gets, ends up having a deputy say something to him that touched him off, and he shot him. The rage, and he let out that rage, and that rage was a release, was a real release after all those years of being bullied and stuff. I know a lot more about the killing of Fawson, but that's who this guy was, and I've been telling people for years, and there might have been some other people that helped him along. I have some correspondence with people that I think that might have been, that could tell you that a little more about it. I interviewed Don's aunt. I interviewed his sister. They're like family to me. I interviewed Captain Don Diod, Bob McNally. I think, let's see. Oh gosh, there was another warden I interviewed. But again, Bill Rose, the oldest living convict at the time. I sent him some money because he'd just gotten out of prison after years and years. I got to interview Frank Dryman. And right away when I said to Frank Dryman, "Do you remember Donald Bujok?" He says, "Bujok, Bujok. You mean Bujack?" And I thought, my God. Because I had been early on when I deciphered this card a little bit. I knew I was on to something, but I didn't know what the hell the pumpkin was until I knew, about 2011, that he went by Bujack. I've got, and he was actually born Bujack. I think it was B-U-J-A-C-K, I think is on his, or B-U-J-A-K is on his actual birth certificate, and a number of cards and stuff. Like I said, again, I've been scouring his father, the internet, for years and years, and we've got his name, Bujack, on there, B-U-J-A-C-K. That's Frank Bujack when he worked at the mines. That was Donald's father, and he signed it in the back. To wrap this up, Donald told you who he was, what he'd been through, and what he was going to do about it. And I've shown you that I do have, I'll show you I have plenty of research I've done over 20 years. This is just one of the books, one of the probably 100 books I have, articles about Fawson's murder, and I got to interview all those people. So this is no small task, and like I said, I've been kind of chastised and alienated from the Zodiac world because I dared to say that I'd solved it. And my work is much more extensive than what you've ever seen before. And someday I'll get somebody to come and take interest in it, but I've got everything to prove my case. And these are only just a few of the books on the research, including medical records to prove that he did have the limp that Falcon's Elm saw that day. So thank you for watching, and I hope I didn't go a little overboard, but I'm a little ADD, and I've always been. So thank you very much for watching, and look for my book, Zodiac, the Montana Connection, or eventually maybe somebody will interview me and ask me the questions, and I'll let you know exactly why and how and what happened with this fella. A very sad case. And again, he had medical conditions that would have led him to be impotent, which was one of the things that, probably another strike against this man. But this man, I'm not asking to feel sorry for him, but I couldn't see how he could have ended up anything else but that with the tortured life he led. Okay? Bye-bye. Thank you so much for watching.